Rapid growth and maturity. Before long it became luxuriant. Then it grows fruit. The magician plucked 2 oranges. Throw it to the audience in turn. Let them take a closer look. This is true. Then asked a lady. Where's your handkerchief? Woman opens the box. The handkerchief is missing. Look at the magician's side. I saw 2 butterflies dancing with a handkerchief. How is this done? See, such a wonderful performance. The audience applauded enthusiastically. This was in 1901 when science was still underdeveloped. The magician's performance is for them almost equivalent to magic. And he also relied on his superb talent. Captured countless audiences. Even the royal family has heard of his name. The prince still takes the future princess. Made a special trip to appreciate his performance. This time, the magician performed the soul out of the body. Requires an audience to come on stage to cooperate. The prince got up. Everyone thought he was going to be on stage in person. But did not expect. The prince pointed to the fiancée beside him. The assistant brought a mirror. The princess also walked to the stage. But watching her get closer and closer, the magician's expression became more shocked. Turns out he knew this woman. They have loved each other since they were childhood sweethearts. But in the end, because of the huge difference in status, had to be separated. I didn't expect to meet again on stage. But under the public, they can't recognize each other at the moment. Then the performance continues. The magician puts Sophie on the cloak, waved in the mirror, then turn around in a circle, and bow to the mirror. The weird scene started to happen. Sophie in the mirror, doing something completely different from her. Then another her walked behind. With a cloud of white mist floating out of the mirror, Sophie almost fainted. The magic ends here. All the audience was impressed by the magician. But the prince dismissed it. I think this is just a trick. I will tear it down sooner or later, and invited the magician to perform in the palace for a few days. Until then, he wants to uncover the lies of the magician himself. But what the master doesn't know is, just the next day, the magician and Sophie have a private meeting. The two began to reminisce in the carriage. The poor boy once became a famous magician. Once a girl has become the future princess. After some emotion, the two separate. And after the magician is gone, Sophie took out a necklace. Was given to her by the magician. Inside is a photo of myself. Original. She missed him all the time. What kind of princess do you carelessly? A few days later, the magician went to the palace to perform as scheduled. At first, he tried a sledgehammer. Conjure a portrait of a king on a piece of white paper. Everyone applauded. But the prince started to tear down the stage. Say it's just a chemical reaction. He said he had to check his sleeves. Is there something hidden? Then he continued to learn the magician. Asked him if he could not rely on any external force. Complete a magic show. Of course the magician will not admit counsel. He fancy the prince's saber. After obtaining the consent of the other party. Take it in your own hands. The magician picks up the sword. Poke it on the ground. Then let go. The sword is stuck by glue. Standing firmly on the smooth floor. But the more amazing is yet to come. The magician called an audience to the stage, trying to pick up the sword. But no matter how hard he tried, even use both hands, I can't make the sword move even a bit. Then the prince himself went into battle. As a result, the sword remained motionless. The prince winked at the magician. But the other party is unmoved. Don't let him down the steps at all. The audience began to ridicule wildly. Finally the magician nodded. The prince successfully picked up the sword. Ended the awkward magic show. Although the audience applauded warmly. But the prince loses face. And Sophie in the audience is also worried. She knew that the magician had completely offended the prince. She secretly found the magician on horseback late at night. And warned him. This prince is not good. He is ready to overthrow the king and become a king. And the reason why he married Sophie as his concubine. It's also because of her family background. The magician realized. Sophie stays with the prince. There must be more ills. So the magician came to the bank the next day. Withdraw all deposits. Ready to go far away with Sophie. But I didn't expect this scene. Were secretly discovered by the sheriff's men. The sheriff reported the matter to the prince. The prince became angry after hearing this. Scolded Sophie severely. And slapped her hard. But Sophie didn't speak. Just slam the door and leave the room. The angry prince followed closely. The sheriff saw by the window. Sophie and the prince walked into the stable one after another. The prince is still cursing. Shortly after, I saw Sophie rushing out on horseback. Lie on the horse back softly. Seems to be seriously injured. Early next morning, the horse ran back to the palace alone. There is a pool of blood on the body. Sophie is nowhere to be seen. Everyone started looking around. Finally found her in the lake. The magician rushed over immediately. Rescue Sophie from the water. Only to find that she has no life. There is a sword wound on the neck. Obviously this is the cause of her death. And the more obvious evidence is, right on Sophie's corpse. Found a little gem. It seems that this was left by the murderer. The magician rightfully recognized, it was the prince who killed Sophie. But the sheriff severely warned him, if there is no valid evidence, must not accuse the prince arbitrarily. And in order to close the case, the sheriff randomly found a scapegoat and convicted. Of course, Mamushi doesn't believe it, but he did not continue to accuse the prince, but to start a new magic show. Different from the past. His performance this time is to summon the souls of the dead. A clear figure appeared on the stage, and can talk to the audience. In the era without holographic projection. This is simply magic. The audience was completely dumbfounded this time. They regard the magician as a prophet. Think he can really summon the souls of the dead. But the sheriff did not agree. He thought it was nothing but slightly more advanced projection technology. It can be done with the level of technology at the time. But soon, the magician performed a more advanced summoning technique. Not only can ghosts appear on the stage, you can walk freely under the stage. This is by no means pure projection technology. Can explain. To uncover the secrets of the magician. Even the prince couldn't help but watch his performance. And this time, the magician summoned Sophie's dead soul. The dead soul of a dead woman appeared on the stage of the magician. The audience asked her, "Who on earth killed you?" And Sophie said, backquote, "That person is in the audience." The audience was in an uproar. Began to suspect that the prince was the murderer. But Sophie hasn't been able to tell more details, and soon disappeared into nothingness. The prince orders the sheriff. If the magician dared to continue performing, capture him immediately. The sheriff finds the magician. Warned him not to show up again. But the magician refused to give in. Summoned Sophie again. The result is naturally greater riots. The sheriff had no choice but to impede public order. Arrest him. But just when he wanted to catch the magician, actually grabbed an empty one. The soldier on the side stretched out his saber. He can go straight through. Like a dead soul. In the end it disappears directly. Didn't even leave a single hair. The sheriff couldn't help but become angry from embarrassment. Find him. They broke into the magician's room. People here are already empty. And on the desk, the sheriff accidentally discovered the structure of Sophie's necklace. He seems to realize something. The sheriff returns to the palace. Came to the stable. Found the necklace that Sophie dropped. According to the structure diagram, open necklace pendant. See the photos of the magician. Then another emerald was found. Looks very familiar. That's right. This is what fell from the prince's sword. The proof is like a mountain. The sheriff finally believed. The prince was the murderer of Sophie. The sheriff found the prince, forcing him to confess guilt. Of course the prince would not admit it, even threatened the sheriff with a gun. But the sheriff had long since been involved in this matter. And the prince's plan to rebel. Report to the king in advance. The king sent a guard to arrest the prince. Now he is dead. Destroy it, hurry up. That's all. A murderer finally got punished. His plan of rebellion naturally fell through, saved the country from turmoil. But the sheriff thought, when everything is over, a kid suddenly stopped him, and give him a bag. Sheriff opens the package. I found it was a thick notebook. Open it again. It actually records the secret of the magician's performance. This was what he wanted to know at the time. The sheriff stopped the child immediately. Who gave it to you? Eisenham. This is the name of the magician. What happened to the sheriff suddenly? Hurriedly flipped through the pockets. Sure enough, Sophie's necklace is gone. Then he saw a familiar figure not far away. Hurriedly chased after. The man holds the necklace in his hand. With a big beard. It's a magician in disguise. He avoided the sheriff's chase all the way. Board the train smoothly. Leave the city. So far the sheriff finally understands. All this is the conspiracy of the magician. He pretended to elope with Sophie first. Anger the prince. Then add medicine to the prince's wine. Trick him into the stable. Fell asleep while taking advantage of the effects of his medicine. So he was full of blood on his sword. Leave the necklace as evidence. Finally, pretending to be injured and fleeing on horseback. Wait for the prince to wake up like this. I think I killed Sophie. And Sophie's death. Naturally also forged. When she drinks the antidote, she wakes up immediately. Several soul-calling performances since then. Also for bluffing. The suspicion of being a real prince murder. Finally, by the sheriff's hand. Forcing the prince to commit suicide. So they can wander around the world. Don't worry about someone chasing you. A story at the end. The magician came to a hidden country. Here is his beloved Sophie. This lover finally got married. And the sheriff found out that he was deceived. But he didn't become angry. Fake is true when it is true. When true is false, false is also true. Compared with such a romantic story. So-called truth. It doesn't seem to be that important.